Joseph Calloway sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the prosthetic leg leaning against the wall. The morning sun leaked through thin curtains, casting weak light across the small apartment. 6 months ago, he had lived in a nice house with a green lawn. 6 months ago, he had been a husband. 6 months ago, he had still believed he could fix his broken life. Now he lived in this one-bedroom apartment on the bad side of town. The walls were thin. The neighbors were loud. The rent was what he could afford on disability payments. Joseph reached for the prosthetic. The doctor said he was lucky. The IED had only taken his right leg below the knee. 3 of his fellow Marines had lost their lives that day in Afghanistan. Sometimes Joseph wondered if they were the lucky ones. He attached the prosthetic with practiced movements. The phantom pain came as it always did, a ghost of agony from a limb no longer there. Joseph gritted his teeth and pushed through it. Pain was an old friend now. His phone buzzed. A text from Frank Morales, the only squad mate who still checked on him. Breakfast, I'm in town for the weekend. Joseph almost ignored it. Being around Frank brought back memories of before the explosion, before the hospital, before Linda had packed her bags and said she couldn't handle a husband who woke up screaming every night. But the empty refrigerator made the decision. For him, Miller's Diner. 30 minutes, Joseph texted back. He pulled on jeans and a faded Marine Corps t-shirt. The mirror showed a stranger, a man with hollow eyes and a beard he had grown to hide the scar on his jaw. At 32, Joseph looked a decade older. The walk to Miller's Diner took longer than it should have. His physical therapist said the limp would improve with time. Joseph had stopped believing in improvements. Frank waited at a corner booth, already halfway through a cup of coffee. He stood when he saw Joseph, face lighting up with a smile that faded when he got a good look at his friend. You look like hell, Frank said, giving Joseph a quick hug before they sat. Good to see you too, Joseph replied. They ordered. Frank got the big breakfast plate, Joseph just coffee. His appetite had vanished months ago. How's the job hunt going? Frank asked. Joseph shrugged. The security firm let me go last month. Said clients were uncomfortable with my condition. That's illegal. You could sue. Don't have the energy for a fight. Joseph stared into his coffee. Anyway, who wants to hire a broken Marine who can't stand for more than an hour? Frank leaned forward. You're not broken, Joe. You're wounded. There's a difference. Joseph didn't answer. They had this conversation every time. Have you been to the VA group I told you about? The one for amputee vets? Don't need to sit in a circle talking about feelings. Frank sighed. What about the house? Sold it last week. Lost money. But the bank was about to foreclose anyway. Linda got most of our savings in the divorce. The waitress brought Frank's food. Joseph watched him eat, feeling nothing but emptiness. You can come stay with me and Sophia in Austin, Frank offered. We have the spare room just until you get back on your feet. I have a place. That dump isn't a home, Joe, and you need people around you right now. Joseph felt anger flare, hot and sudden. I don't need your pity. It's not pity, it's what brothers do. We're not in the Corps anymore. Frank put down his fork. Once a Marine, always a Marine, you know that. Joseph stood abruptly, the chair scraping loud against the floor. He dropped a $5 bill on the table. Thanks for breakfast. Joe, wait! But Joseph was already limping toward the door, ignoring the stares from other customers. Outside, the Texas heat hit him like a wall. He began the long walk back to his apartment, each step a reminder of what he had lost. The building looked even worse in daylight. Paint peeled from the walls. A group of teenagers smoked in the parking lot, watching Joseph with bored eyes as he passed. Inside, the emptiness waited for him. Joseph had sold most of the furniture to pay bills. What remained was just enough: a bed, a small table, a single chair, and an old TV that played 3 channels when the antenna was positioned just right. He sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out the small orange bottle from the nightstand drawer. Pain pills. He had been rationing them, taking half the prescribed dose to make them last. The doctor had refused to refill the prescription early, warning about dependency. Joseph dry swallowed, one and lay back on the unmade bed. The ceiling had water stains that looked like continents on a map. He traced their shapes with his eyes until the pill dulled the edges of his thoughts. The dreams came as they always did. Blood on sand, the deafening blast, screams of men he couldn't save. Joseph jerked awake hours later, sweat-soaked and gasping. The room was dark. He had slept through the day. His phone showed 3 missed calls from Frank and a text. "Call me when you cool off. I'm worried about you." Joseph deleted the message. He didn't want Frank's worry. He didn't want anyone's concern or pity or help. He just wanted everything to stop hurting. The refrigerator held a single beer and a takeout container with leftovers from 3 days ago. Joseph took the beer and went to the small balcony overlooking the parking lot. Night had fallen. Stars were visible between the clouds. In Afghanistan, the night sky had been brilliant with stars, unobscured by city lights. Joseph had often stood watch looking up at them, feeling small but connected to something immense. Now he felt small and connected to nothing. His phone rang again. Frank. Joseph silenced it and turned back to the stars. "I'm tired," he whispered, to the empty night. So damn tired. The beer was warm and flat. He drank it anyway, then went back inside and opened the drawer with the pills. There were 23 left. He wondered if that would be enough to make the pain stop forever. The thought should have scared him. Instead, it felt like a door opening, offering a way out of the dark room his life had become. Joseph lined the pills up on the table, neat and orderly like the Marine he once was. Then he sat and stared at them, thinking about the men who had died in that blast. Thinking about how he had failed them by not seeing the signs of the IED. Thinking about how he had failed Linda by coming home a different man. Thinking about how he kept failing every day at finding a reason to keep going. As he reached for the first pill, a sound came from outside his door, a whimper, soft and pained. Then a scratch against the wood. Joseph froze, hand hovering over. The pills. The sound came again, a definite whine, animal and distressed. Something pulled him to his feet. He limped to the door and opened it. There, in the dim hallway light, sat a German shepherd. The dog was thin, ribs showing through its matted fur. A healing wound marked its right flank. Around its neck hung military tags that caught the light. The dog looked up at Joseph with intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through him. Then, it whimpered again. A sound of pain and hope mingled together. Joseph stared at the dog, and for the first time in months he felt something stir inside him that wasn't pain or emptiness. It was a small feeling, fragile as a match flame in wind, but it was there. "Hey," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "Where did you come from?" The dog took a hesitant step toward him, then another. Joseph knelt down, awkwardly because of his prosthetic, and held out his hand. "It's okay," he said. "You're safe now." The German shepherd limped into Joseph's apartment, moving with caution. Joseph closed the door and watched as the dog sniffed around the small space. Despite its thin frame and injured side, the animal carried itself with dignity. Joseph went to the kitchen and filled a bowl with water. The dog approached slowly, then drank with desperate thirst. When it finished, it looked up at Joseph with eyes that seemed too knowing for an animal. "You're a military dog, aren't you?" Joseph asked, noticing the tags again. He knelt down carefully and read the metal plate. Apollo USMC K9 unit, a Marine Corps dog. Joseph felt a strange connection form instantly. This animal had served just as he had. "Apollo," he said. The dog's ears perked up at the name. "How did you end up here?" Joseph checked the wound on Apollo's side. It wasn't fresh but hadn't fully healed either. The fur around it was matted with old blood and dirt. "Let's clean you up." In the small bathroom, Joseph wet a washcloth with warm water. Apollo stood still as Joseph gently cleaned the wound. No whining, no pulling away, just the steady patience of a trained military animal. "Good boy," Joseph said. The words felt strange in his mouth. He hadn't spoken kindly to anyone in months. The refrigerator had little to offer, but Joseph found some sliced turkey that was still good. He put it in a bowl for Apollo, who ate quickly but neatly. "You've got better manners than me," Joseph said. After eating, Apollo explored the apartment, sniffing corners and under furniture. Joseph watched, wondering what to do next. He should probably call animal control or look for Apollo's handler. But something held him back. Joseph searched online for "missing military working dog Apollo." Several news articles appeared. He clicked. On the first one, dated 3 months ago, "Military working dog team ambushed in Helmand Province," the headline read. Joseph scanned the article. A Marine patrol with a K9 unit had been attacked. 2 Marines killed, 1 wounded. The dog handler had survived but reported his K9 partner missing after the chaos. The dog was presumed dead. "You've been missing for 3 months, Joseph said, looking at Apollo, who had settled on the floor near his feet. "How did you get all the way here?" Apollo tilted his head, as if considering the question. Joseph continued reading. The article mentioned the lost dog had been part of a special program training K9s for advanced field operations. No further details were given for security reasons. Night fell. Joseph realized he had forgotten about the pills still lined up on the table. He swept them back into the bottle and returned it to the drawer. Having Apollo in the apartment had pushed those dark thoughts away, at least for now. Joseph made a bed for Apollo using an old blanket in the corner of the room. But when he lay down on his own bed, Apollo jumped up and settled at his feet. "That's not your spot," Joseph said half-heartedly. Apollo just laid his head down and watched him with those intelligent eyes. Joseph didn't have the energy to argue. He turned off the light and closed his eyes. The nightmare came as it always did. Heat, dust, the road stretching ahead. Joseph was back in the Humvee. He saw the disturbed dirt, too late. Shouted a warning that never left his mouth. Then the world exploded into fire and screams. Joseph thrashed in bed, trapped in the memory. Sweat soaked his sheets. In the nightmare, he was trying to reach Miller, who was screaming for help. But Joseph's leg was gone, and he could only drag himself through sand turning red with blood. Something heavy pressed against his chest. Something warm and alive. Joseph fought against it until a wet tongue licked his face. The dream shattered. He gasped, returning to the present. Apollo lay across his chest, face close to Joseph's. The dog whined softly and licked his cheek again. Joseph's heart hammered in his chest. His t-shirt was soaked with sweat, but the panic was fading. Pushed back by the solid weight and warmth of the dog. "How did you know?" Joseph whispered. Apollo settled beside him, head resting on Joseph's chest. The steady rhythm of the dog's breathing gradually calmed him. For the first time in months, Joseph fell back to sleep without reaching for pills. Morning came with sunlight, streaming through the cheap curtains. Joseph woke to find Apollo still beside him, alert and watching the door. The dog's presence felt like an anchor, keeping Joseph connected to the world. Joseph sat up and rubbed his face. He had slept through the night. No more nightmares after Apollo woke him. "You need food," Joseph said. "We both do." He hadn't been to the grocery store in weeks, surviving on delivery and whatever he could grab from the corner store. But now, he had someone else to think about. Getting dressed, Joseph felt different. The crushing weight that had pressed on him for months seemed lighter. Not gone, but manageable. He strapped on his prosthetic leg and found Apollo watching the process with interest. "It's not pretty, but it works," Joseph told him. Outside, the day was bright and cool. Apollo stayed close to Joseph's side as they walked to the small grocery store 3 blocks away. The dog moved with military precision, alert to their surroundings but completely under control. People stared. Not at Joseph's limping walk for once, but at the magnificent animal beside him. Apollo ignored the attention, focused only on Joseph and their path. In the store, an elderly clerk approached with a frown. "Sir, no dogs allowed except service animals." Before Joseph could respond, Apollo sat perfectly at his side, the picture of a trained service dog. "He's my service dog," Joseph said, surprising himself with the words. It wasn't true, but it felt Right somehow. The clerk looked doubtful but nodded and walked away. Joseph bought dog food, fresh meat, bread, and vegetables. More food than he had purchased in months. At the checkout, he found himself planning meals for the week ahead. On the walk home, Joseph's phone rang. Frank again. This time, Joseph answered. "Hey," he said. "Joe?" Frank's voice was filled with relief. "I've been worried sick. You okay?" Joseph looked down at Apollo walking steadily beside him. "I'm getting there," he said. "Something happened. Something good." "What's that?" "I made a new friend. A fellow Marine, actually." "That's great. Who is it?" "His name is Apollo. He's a German Shepherd, ex-military working dog. Showed up at my door last night." Frank was silent for a moment. "A dog? That's unexpected." "He needed help," Joseph said simply. "Turns out I did, too." As they approached the apartment building, Apollo suddenly tensed. His ears went forward and a low growl rumbled in his chest. "What is it, boy?" Joseph asked. Apollo stared at a black SUV parked across the street. A man in sunglasses sat inside watching them. When he noticed Joseph looking, he started the engine and drove away. "Weird," Joseph muttered. He felt a chill despite the warm day. Apollo relaxed once the vehicle disappeared, but Joseph couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, that by taking in Apollo, he had connected himself to something larger than a lost dog looking for shelter. Back in the apartment, Joseph filled a bowl with fresh water for Apollo. As the dog drank, Joseph noticed something he had missed in the dim light the night before, a small raised bump under the fur at the base of Apollo's neck. Gently, Joseph parted the thick fur. There, embedded in the dog's skin, was what looked like a tiny metal disc. It wasn't a normal microchip like pets got at the vet. This was something else. Something advanced. "What did they put in you, Apollo?" Joseph whispered. "And who's looking? For you now?" Apollo just looked at him with those knowing eyes that seemed to hold secrets Joseph was only beginning to understand. A week passed with Apollo by Joseph's side. Each night the dog sensed Joseph's nightmares before they fully took hold, waking him with a gentle paw or wet nose. Each morning, Joseph found himself more rested than he had been in months. Joseph called the VA hospital to make an appointment he had been avoiding for weeks. The receptionist sounded surprised to hear from him. "Dr. Wright has been trying to reach you, Mr. Calloway," she said. "She wants to see you tomorrow if possible." Joseph agreed to the appointment. When he hung up, he looked at Apollo. "Guess you're coming with me tomorrow." That night, Joseph had a strange dream. He wasn't in Afghanistan. Instead, he was running on 4 legs through a training course. He could smell a dozen different scents: human sweat, gun oil, explosives. A voice called commands, and he responded instantly, driven by duty and the promise of praise. Joseph woke with a start. The dream had been so real he could still taste dust in his mouth. Apollo was watching him from the foot of the bed, head tilted. "That was weird," Joseph muttered. The next morning, they took the bus to the VA hospital. Apollo sat quietly at Joseph's feet, drawing curious glances from other passengers. At the hospital, the receptionist raised her eyebrows at the dog but didn't comment. Dr. Eleanor Wright was a small woman with short gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She smiled when Joseph entered her office. "It's good to see you, Joseph. You've been missed at group therapy." Her eyes moved to Apollo. "And who is this?" "This is Apollo. He's a military working dog. Or was." Dr. Wright leaned forward. "May I?" she asked, extending her hand toward Apollo. Joseph nodded. Apollo sniffed her hand, then allowed her to pet him. "He's beautiful," she said. "How did you two find each other?" Joseph told her the story of Apollo appearing at his door. He left out the part about the pills he had lined up that night. "He helps with the nightmares," Joseph finished. "Somehow he knows when they're coming." Dr. Wright's expression changed from polite interest to focused attention. "That's fascinating. Some service dogs are trained to respond to anxiety signals, but it usually takes months of training with their specific person." She looked thoughtfully at Apollo. Would you mind if I run some tests while you're here? Nothing invasive. I'm part of a research team studying trauma responses in veterans. We've recently begun including service animals in our research. Joseph hesitated, then nodded. What kind of tests? 2 hours later, Joseph sat in a different room with electrodes attached to his temples. Apollo lay beside him with similar sensors, attached to his head. Dr. Wright sat at a computer watching lines jump across the screen. This is remarkable, she said almost to herself. I've never seen anything like this. What is it? Joseph asked. Dr. Wright turned the screen so he could see. These are your brainwaves, she said, pointing to the top half of the screen. And these are Apollo's, she added, indicating the bottom half. Joseph didn't understand what he was seeing, but the patterns on both halves of the screen seemed to rise and fall together. Your brainwave patterns are synchronizing, Dr. Wright explained. It's subtle but definite. When your stress indicators increase, Apollo's brain activity changes in response, even before you show physical signs of distress. She turned back to the screen. But there's something else happening too. Your patterns are also adjusting to match his. It's like a feedback loop. What does that mean? Joseph asked. I'm not entirely sure. Neural synchronicity happens between humans who are close, parents and children, long married couples. But I've never seen it between a human and an animal, certainly not to this degree. Dr. Wright removed the sensors from both of them. Joseph, last night, did you have any unusual dreams? Dreams that didn't seem like your usual nightmares? Joseph stared at her. How did you know that? Just a hunch. Can you describe the dream? Joseph told her about running on 4 legs, smelling things humans shouldn't be able to smell. Dr. Wright's eyes widened. You were dreaming from Apollo's perspective, she said. This goes beyond normal companion bonding. Something very unusual is happening between you two. On the bus ride home, Joseph thought about Dr. Wright's words. She had asked to see them again next week and mentioned wanting to bring in colleagues. What's happening to us, Apollo? Joseph asked quietly. That night, the dream came again. He was Apollo, younger and in training. A man in a lab coat was injecting something at the base of his neck. It hurt, but he stayed still because that was his job. Good dogs stayed still. The man was saying something about neural transmitters and breakthrough technology. Joseph woke sweating. Apollo was already awake, watching him with those intelligent eyes. Joseph reached for his phone and searched military working dog neural transmitter. Nothing relevant appeared. He tried canine neural interface program. Again, nothing useful. As he set the phone down, it rang. The screen showed Frank's name. Joe, are you home? Frank asked when Joseph answered. Yeah, why? I'm outside your building. Can I come up? It's important. Minutes later, Frank stood in Joseph's small apartment looking nervously at Apollo. That's the dog you mentioned? Frank asked. This is Apollo, Joseph said. What's going on? Frank ran a hand through his hair. I did some asking around about your new friend. Called some contacts still active duty. Joe, that dog isn't just any military working dog. He was part of something called CNIP, Canine Neural Interface Program, highly classified. Joseph felt a chill. How classified? Enough that 2 guys from military intelligence came asking questions after I started poking around. They were very interested in where Apollo might be. Joseph thought of the man in the black SUV. What is CNIP exactly? My contact wouldn't say much, just that it involves experimental tech that creates enhanced communication between dogs and handlers. Apollo was one of the first test subjects. Frank looked at the German shepherd. Whatever they put in him, they want it back. He's not a piece of equipment, Joseph said, anger rising. He's a veteran just like us. I know that, but they don't see it that way. Frank looked grim. Joe, these aren't people you want to mess with. My advice? Take Apollo to the nearest military base and hand him over. Joseph placed his hand on Apollo's head. The dog leaned against his leg, a solid presence. Not happening, Joseph said. He found me for a reason, Frank sighed. I figured you'd say that. Look, there's someone you should talk to. Dr. Eleanor Wright at the VA. She might be able to help. I just met with her today, Joseph said, surprised. Small world. She's known for her work with veteran trauma, but she also consults on military projects involving animal behavior. If anyone can help you understand what's going on, it's her. After Frank left, Joseph sat on the floor beside Apollo. He gently examined the small metal disc at the base of the dog's neck. It was flush with the skin, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. So you're special, Joseph said. That makes two of us. Apollo rested his head on Joseph's lap. As Joseph stroked the dog's fur, he felt a strange sensation, a flicker of emotions that weren't his own. Loyalty, protection, purpose. Joseph wasn't sure if he was imagining it or if something truly remarkable was happening between them. But one thing was clear. He and Apollo were now bound together, linked by more than chance or circumstance. And whatever came next, they would face it together. Joseph sat in Dr. Wright's office a week later, watching as she showed his file to a stern-looking woman in a military uniform. The woman's name tag read Colner Harmon. Apollo lay at Joseph's feet, tense and alert. The synchronization is unlike anything in our records, Dr. Wright was saying. Their brainwave patterns continue to align more closely each day. Colonel Harmon studied Joseph with cold eyes. Mr. Calloway, I'm the director of the Canine Neural Interface Program. That dog you've taken in represents millions in military research and development. His name is Apollo, Joseph said. And he found me. I didn't take him from anyone. Colonel Harmon's mouth tightened. Apollo was reported missing after an operation in Afghanistan. We believed he had been killed. His handler was severely injured in the same incident. Is his handler okay? Joseph asked. Sergeant Lewis survived, but suffered traumatic brain injury. He's still recovering. Colonel Harmon leaned forward. Apollo was our most successful CNIPE subject. The neural transmitter at the base of his neck was designed to enhance communication between dog and handler. But what you're experiencing goes beyond our project parameters. Dr. Wright spoke up. Colonel, what Joseph and Apollo share could revolutionize our understanding of interspecies neural communication. The therapeutic implications for veterans with PTSD are enormous. Colonel Harmon nodded. Which is why I'm offering you a position in our program, Mr. Calloway. Full-time employment with excellent benefits. You and Apollo would help us advance CNIP to the next level. Joseph felt Apollo press against his leg. A feeling that wasn't his own flickered through his mind. Distrust. What exactly would this job involve? Joseph asked. Training, testing, some lab work. Nothing Apollo hasn't done before. Colonel Harmon smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. We need to understand how this connection formed between you two. It wasn't supposed to be possible without our specialized training protocols. Joseph looked down at Apollo, then at Dr. Wright. She gave him a small nod. I need to think about it, Joseph said. Colonel Harmon stood. Of course. But don't take too long. Apollo is technically military property. If you refuse to cooperate, we have the authority to reclaim him. After she left, Dr. Wright sighed. I'm sorry, Joseph, I had to report Apollo's case. The neural technology is classified. Can they really take him? Joseph asked. They can try, Dr. Wright said quietly. But I don't think it would be easy. Your connection with Apollo is something special. Breaking it could harm you both. On the way home, Joseph couldn't shake his unease. The bus was crowded, and a man in a dark jacket kept glancing their way. When Joseph and Apollo got off at their stop, the man followed. Joseph quickened his pace. His prosthetic leg made running difficult, but fear pushed him forward. Apollo stayed close, body tense with alertness. They turned a corner into an alley Joseph knew led to a busy street. Halfway through, two more men appeared at the far end, blocking their exit. Mr. Calloway, called the man behind them. We just want to talk. Joseph spun around. The man had a hand inside his jacket. About what? Joseph asked, trying to stay calm. About returning government property, said one of the men ahead of them. No one needs to get hurt, Apollo growled, a deep rumble that Joseph felt rather than heard. Suddenly images flashed through Joseph's mind. Apollo lunging at the man behind them, going for the wrist, disabling the threat. It wasn't a thought or a suggestion. It was knowledge, battle-tested and certain. Now, Apollo, Joseph commanded. The German shepherd launched himself at the man reaching into his jacket. In one smooth motion, Apollo locked his jaws around the man's wrist. There was a sharp cry and a metallic clatter as a taser fell to the ground. Joseph didn't hesitate. He scooped up the fallen weapon and pointed it at the other two men who had started forward. Stay back, Joseph warned. Apollo released the first man's wrist and returned to Joseph's side, teeth bared. You're making a mistake, said one of the men, holding his hands up. Colonel Harmon will find you. Tell her to leave us alone, Joseph said. He backed away slowly with Apollo beside him, keeping the taser raised until they reached the busy street. Once in the crowd, Joseph ditched the taser in a trash can. His heart hammered in his chest. We need help, boy, he told Apollo. 20 minutes. Later, Joseph knocked on Frank's apartment door. Frank's eyes widened when he saw Joseph's pale face. They came for him, Joseph said without preamble. Harmon's people. Frank pulled them inside quickly. Are you hurt? We're okay, but we need somewhere to stay. My apartment isn't safe. Frank's wife, Sophia, appeared from the kitchen looking concerned. What's happening? My friend needs our help, Frank told her, then turned to Joseph. You can stay here tonight, but then we need a better plan. These people have resources. That evening, after a hot meal that Joseph barely tasted, he sat with Frank in the living room. Apollo lay between them, watchful. There's something I haven't told you, Joseph said. He explained about the dream connection, the shared feelings, the way he and Apollo had fought together in the alley as if they shared one mind. Frank whistled. That's something else, Joe. No wonder they want him back. It's not just the technology, Joseph said. There's something more happening. Dr. Wright said our brainwaves are synchronizing. It's like we're becoming linked somehow. Frank considered. This. So what's the plan? I need to learn more about CNIP. What they're really doing with these dogs. Apollo was trying to tell me something in my dreams about the program, but I'm only getting pieces. My contact mentioned a research facility outside of town. Very hush-hush. Might be where they run CNIP. Joseph nodded. I'm also going to talk to Dr. Wright again. She seems to be on our side, even though she works with them. That night, sleeping on Frank's couch with Apollo beside him, Joseph slipped into their shared dream space more deliberately than before. He found himself in a sterile room with metal tables. Dogs in kennels lined the walls. Men and women in lab coats moved between them, making notes. One picked up a small device similar to the one embedded in Apollo's neck. The latest version can record neural pathways, the lab tech was saying. Complete thought patterns. With enough exposure, we could potentially download a dog's entire training and experience. What about the reverse? Asked another voice. Human to canine transfer? That's phase 2. Imagine downloading a handler's combat experience into a dog. Instant battle-ready canine units with human tactical knowledge. Joseph pulled out of the dream with a gasp. Apollo was watching him, eyes gleaming in the dark. They're not just trying to communicate with dogs, Joseph whispered. They want to use them as data storage, walking weapons they can program. Apollo's thoughts brushed against his mind. Dark purpose. Wrong use. Escape. Joseph wrapped his arm around the dog. I won't let them take you, he promised. We'll find a way to stop this. As dawn broke, Joseph made a decision. They couldn't just run. They needed to expose what CNIP was really doing. And to do that, they needed allies. First stop tomorrow, he told Apollo, is to find Dr. Wright. Then we find out just how deep this rabbit hole goes. Joseph and Apollo found Dr. Wright in the hospital parking lot early the next morning. She looked surprised to see them. Joseph, I was just about to call you. What happened? Colonel Harmon is furious. Her men tried to take Apollo yesterday, Joseph said. We need to talk somewhere private. They went to a small coffee shop 2 blocks away. Apollo lay under the table, alert for any sign of trouble. Joseph told Dr. Wright about the attempted capture and the dreams revealing CNIP's true purpose. Dr. Wright's face grew pale. I knew they were pushing boundaries, but downloading human combat experiences into animals, that crosses every ethical line. Can you help us? Joseph asked. Dr. Wright was quiet for a moment. Yes, she finally said, but not alone. I have colleagues who would be horrified by this research, and I know a journalist who specializes in military accountability stories. She took out her phone and began typing. First, you need a safe place to stay. I have a cabin about an hour from the city. No one knows about it. What about evidence? Joseph asked. We need proof of what they're doing. I can access some of the research files. Not everything, but enough to show the program exists. Dr. Wright looked up from her phone. But the most compelling evidence is you and Apollo. Your connection is proof of what they've created. That afternoon, they drove to Dr. Wright's cabin in Frank's truck. Frank had insisted on coming along, saying, Marines don't leave their own behind. The cabin was small but comfortable, hidden among pine trees beside a lake. As night fell, they sat around the kitchen table planning their next move. My contact at the Washington Post is interested, Dr. Wright said, but we need more than just your testimony and my limited access files. What about the research facility? Frank asked. The one I heard about outside town. Dr. Wright nodded. That's where most of the CNIP work happens, but it's secure. Military guards restricted access. Joseph felt Apollo's thoughts touch his mind. Memory. Building. Layout. Apollo knows the facility, Joseph said. He was trained there. I think he can show me the layout through our connection. That night, Joseph lay on the cabin's small bed with Apollo beside him. He focused on deepening their mental link, pushing past the barrier between their minds. The shared dream space formed around him. He was seeing through Apollo's memories, a large compound with chain-link fences, guards at checkpoints. Inside, long corridors led to rooms filled with equipment, dogs in kennels, a central laboratory where Apollo had been implanted with the neural transmitter. Joseph memorized everything: security positions, door codes Apollo had watched handlers enter, ventilation ducts large enough for a dog to crawl through. When morning came, Joseph drew a detailed map of the facility. This is incredible, Dr. Wright said, studying it. With this, we could access the central database. All the CNIP files would be there. It's still risky, Frank warned. If they catch us, it's prison or worse. If we do nothing, they'll keep hunting Apollo, Joseph said. And they'll make more dogs like him, turning veterans' loyal partners into weaponized databanks. The plan came together over the next 2 days. Dr. Wright would use her credentials to enter the facility for a consultation. Joseph and Apollo would hide in her vehicle. Frank would wait outside as backup. Once inside, Apollo would guide Joseph through ventilation systems to avoid security. They would download the CNIP files and escape the same way, with evidence to expose the program. The night before their mission, Joseph sat on the cabin porch with Apollo beside him. Stars filled the clear sky. Whatever happens tomorrow, Joseph said, I want you to know you saved my life. Not just that night when I was ready to give up, but every day since. Apollo pressed against his leg. Through their connection, Joseph felt warmth, loyalty, and something that could only be described as love. The next afternoon, they put their plan into action. Dr. Wright drove through the facility checkpoint, her ID badge clearing the way. Joseph and Apollo lay hidden under blankets in the back of her SUV. Once parked in the underground garage, Joseph and Apollo slipped out and found a maintenance door. Apollo led the way, his memories guiding them through service corridors. They reached a ventilation access panel. Joseph removed it and Apollo went in first. Joseph followed, crawling on his stomach through the dusty metal duct. His prosthetic leg made it awkward, but he pushed on. Apollo's memories led them to a grate above the main computer lab. The room was empty. Dinner break, just as they had hoped. Joseph lowered himself down, then helped Apollo jump to the floor. Working quickly, Joseph accessed the system using passwords Apollo had seen technicians enter. Files appeared on the screen. CNIP Phase 2, Neural Transfer Protocols, Human Canine. Integration. Joseph plugged in the drive Dr. Wright had given him and began copying files. Seconds stretched into minutes as the data transferred. Suddenly, Apollo tensed. Footsteps in the hallway. Joseph felt alarm pulse through their connection. The door opened. Colonel Harmon stood there, flanked by 2 guards with weapons drawn. "Mr. Calloway," she said coldly. "I'm disappointed. This could have been a partnership." "I've seen what your partnership really means," Joseph said. "Using dogs as downloadable weapons, exploiting the bond between handlers and their animals." "You've seen nothing," Colonel Harmon replied. "What we're creating will save countless lives. Imagine dogs with human intelligence on the battlefield." "At what cost?" Joseph asked. "These aren't just tools, they're living beings. Veterans, like me." Colonel Harmon signaled to her guards. "Secure them both. The dog is not to be harmed. The implant is too valuable." As the guards advanced, Joseph felt Apollo's mind fully merge with his own. For a moment, they were truly one being with shared purpose. Joseph knew exactly what to do without words or signals. Apollo lunged at the lights, leaping high to catch the power cable with his teeth. The lab plunged into darkness. In the confusion, Joseph grabbed the drive and moved with Apollo's night, vision guiding him. They slipped past the guards and out the door, locking it behind them. Alarms blared as they raced through the facility. Joseph no longer needed Apollo's memories. They moved as one, anticipating each other's movements perfectly. They found an emergency exit and burst outside into fading daylight. Frank was waiting in his truck where they had planned. Joseph and Apollo jumped in, and they sped away as security vehicles mobilized behind them. 3 weeks later, Joseph sat in Dr. Wright's office watching the news. The headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen. "Military Research Program Suspended Pending Congressional Investigation." The Washington Post story had created a firestorm. The evidence Joseph and Apollo had gathered revealed not just ethical violations but potentially illegal human and animal testing. The Pentagon had shut down CNIP while investigations continued. "What happens now?" Joseph asked Dr. Wright. "We've been approved for our own research program," she said, smiling. "Studying the therapeutic potential of human-animal neural connections for veterans with PTSD. No implants, no weaponization, just healing." Joseph felt Apollo's approval warm in his mind. "And us? You two will be our first official case study, if you're willing. Full-time position, decent salary. You'll help us understand this connection and teach other veterans how to build similar bonds with their service dogs, though probably not as profound as yours." Joseph placed his hand on Apollo's head. In the weeks since their escape, their connection had only grown stronger. Joseph no longer had nightmares. The phantom pain in his missing leg had diminished. He had purpose again. "What do you think, Apollo?" Joseph asked aloud, though he already felt the answer in his mind. Apollo looked up at him with those intelligent eyes that had seen him at his lowest and helped him rise again. Their shared thought was simple and clear. Together. "We're in," Joseph told Dr. Wright. "Where do we start?"